You just got approved for a 10% personal loan to wipe out your 22% credit cards. You log into your banking app. You watch the loan funds hit your checking account. You immediately transfer those funds to pay off the Discover card, the Chase card, and the retail cards. The balances drop to zero. You take a deep breath. You feel like a financial genius. You think you just beat the system. You think you just outsmarted the banks. But the brutal reality is, statistically, you didn't just solve your debt problem. You just loaded the gun to double it. Because when it comes to getting out of debt, shuffling debt around is one of the biggest mistakes you can make. You are not addressing the root issue when you do this. I see people do this all the time. They think they're making a highly intelligent, responsible move. They think the enemy is the interest rate. But the real enemy is something entirely different. If you are a 30 or 40-something professional right now, making decent money, maybe between $75,000 and $120,000 a year, you are feeling the squeeze. Childcare costs are insane. Groceries are breaking the budget. You are trying to maintain a normal suburban lifestyle, but the math just isn't working anymore. So you turn to a consolidation loan. It sounds great because you go after the interest rate. You consolidate all your debt into this lower interest rate. Mathematically, that sounds like a massive win. But what actually happens inside your brain when you do this? When you clear those credit card balances with a loan, you suddenly reset your available credit limits. You just freed up $15,000 or $20,000 in available revolving credit. To a brain that is exhausted by inflation and the daily stress of making ends meet, that available credit looks an awful lot like new money. It creates a dangerous illusion of fictional wealth. You feel a false sense of victory because the card says zero, but your behavior hasn't changed. Always remember, when it comes to personal finance, your behavior change is what takes you into the future of winning with money. It is not going to be the math. It is you, your behaviors, your rhythms, and your habits around money. Right now, we are sitting in the middle of a massive national crisis. Total U.S. credit card debt has reached a terrifying $1.28 trillion. The average credit card interest rate is sitting right at a punishing 22.3%. So millions of Americans are trying to math their way out of this spending crisis by taking out personal loans to clear their cards, and they are losing. The flow into serious delinquency, meaning people who are 90 days or more late on their payments, has hit 7.13%. The system is cracking. Let me paint a picture for you and tell me if this sounds familiar. Let's look at a typical couple. We'll call them the emergency card illusionists. They consolidate $20,000 of high-interest debt into a 5-year personal loan. They want to be responsible. They cut up their store cards and their basic cashback cards, but they decide to keep that one high-limit premium travel card open. They tell themselves they are keeping it strictly for emergencies, or maybe just to put the groceries on it so they can get the airline miles, but they promise they will pay it off every single month. 4 months later, life happens. Inflation hits their grocery budget harder than they expected. The car needs new brakes. The HVAC system starts making a weird noise. They swipe the emergency card. They justify it because, well, it's an emergency. Then the holidays roll around. They don't want to deprive the kids. They swipe it again. Fast forward 12 months, they are now staring at their banking app in sheer panic because they now owe a $400 a month payment on the consolidation loan, and they have a fresh $10,000 balance on the emergency card. By trying to save a few $100 on interest, they have effectively trapped themselves in an unmanageable monthly cash flow crisis. You are now servicing 2 massive debt vehicles simultaneously on the exact same fixed income. You are taking on another loan even though all the other loans went into that loan. It is just this idea of moving your debt around. And this brings us to the ultimate paradigm shift. You have to choose between math and behavior. The outdated rule of personal finance says you must always chase the lowest interest rate. The outdated rule says to list out your debts by the highest interest rate to the lowest interest rate. Mathematically, that would be correct. But the new reality is that interest rates are not the reason you are broke. Your lack of friction is the reason you are broke. You cannot outsmart a behavioral problem with a calculator. You are not an Excel spreadsheet. You are a human being who gets tired, who gets stressed, and who wants to go out to eat after a long week of work. Addressing only the math and the interest rate does not address you as a person. So if you are sick and tired of this cycle, if you are terrified of doubling your exposure again, you need a new system. You do not need a new loan. You need artificial friction. I call this the behavioral firewall system. It happens in 3 distinct, non-negotiable phases. Phase 1 is the plastic purge. The sooner you accept the fact of keeping your debts separate, the sooner you get the behavior change. You must physically destroy the cards. You must delete them from your Apple Wallet. You must remove them from your Amazon account. You have to revoke your own access to the revolving credit line immediately. You cannot trust your willpower when you are tired. You have to build a firewall between you and the ability to borrow money. Phase 2 is the scorched earth margin. People that continue to live the exact same lifestyle they lived as they were going into debt are not going to see any progress. You have to make temporary lifestyle changes. You have to ask yourself, what if we just did scorched earth? What if we sacrificed a major lifestyle standard for 9 months, for 12 months, or for 18 months? You stop going out to eat. You cut all the subscriptions. You cut anything that is not fundamentally required to keep you alive. You only pay for food, shelter, utilities, transportation, insurance, and childcare. Everything else gets slashed. Your lifestyle is going to have to look completely different while you are paying debt. Why? Because that is how you mathematically create margin. You need raw cash to throw at the problem. And once you have that margin, you move to phase 3, the momentum strike. This is where you abandon the math entirely. Instead of the debt avalanche, you use the debt snowball. You list out all of your debts from the smallest balance to the largest balance, completely regardless of the interest rate. You pay the minimum payments on everything else, and you attack that smallest debt with every ounce of scorched earth margin you have created. When you pay off that smallest debt, even if it's just a tiny $700 medical bill or a small credit card, it changes your brain. It's literally this zap of hope. You realize you are changing your way. You realize you are doing something you have never done before. You paid it off in full, and you realize that freedom is actually possible. You look at the next debt and you realize you can do this. Those early quick wins are absolutely huge for your behavior change because you start to see that you are the magic to winning with money, not the bank. When you try to pay off the highest interest rate first, it takes a smaller effect because you don't get as much hope in your system. You stare at a massive balance for months with no dopamine hit, no sense of victory, and that's exactly when people give up and go back to shuffling debt around. Stop shuffling. Stop looking for a third-party company or a clever loan to fix your life. As soon as you realize that you are the one that can solve this problem, you realize you don't need all these tricks. You can just do it yourself. True wealth building starts when you fundamentally outgrow your old financial habits. It starts when you stop borrowing money. It starts when you look your debt in the face, create the margin, and systematically destroy it piece by piece. That is how you reclaim your income. That is how you take control of your money and actually build a life you love.